Welcome to the West bedroom. It was a guest bedroom in Kipling's time. Relatively small but very cozy, with an incredible view from the window, which is now totally obscured by plants. But the bed here is actually Kipling's marital bed. You can see the initials, Caroline Kipling and Rudyard Kipling, embroidered there by the Royal School of Embroidery. One of the frequent guests at Kipling's house was Stanley Baldwin, the Prime Minister, and Rudyard's cousin. He loved taking long walks around Bateman's and would come back soaking wet, you know, British weather, with his coat 6 inches deep in mud. So Rudyard decided to put a radiator into the closet to keep his clothes dry. I think it's lovely. It's a lovely touch. You see the radiator. And there is another very interesting story about this wardrobe trunk built specifically for sea voyages. But before I tell you the story, I want to ask you a question. The trunk was made by Louis Vuitton, very good designer of luggage, but for some reason he's decided to put a hump on top of the wardrobe. So before I go further, you try to tell me, what is this hump for? Kipling was a great traveler. He traveled all around the world. Obviously, he was born in India and worked in India for a long time. Then he took a long way back to England through China, Japan, across America, and across the Atlantic from the other side. He traveled to Australia, he traveled to New Zealand, Canada. They went to South Africa every winter when it was the summer in South Africa. So they were great travelers. But in the 1930s, they didn't travel as much, and he sold this trunk to a local family in Burwash. And we've lost this trunk for more than 60 years. Only in the 90s, the children of the family who bought it were clearing out the loft, and they discovered this trunk, and they've managed to just about read the name Kipling on the top of it and gave it back to the museum, to the National Trust and to Bateman's. So that was a very, very generous gesture. And I don't know if you had time to think about this hump on top of the trunk and why Louis Vuitton, being a good designer, designed it like that. But I'll tell you now, it was a simple, foolproof way to make sure that the trunk is always the right way up. because you can write on top of it this way up, but how do you know that the person who handles it can read English when you travel all around the world, or can read at all? And also, on our parcels we write this way up, and we know how often this sign can be ignored. So that was a good designing decision, and that's what you pay for when you buy a good designer's piece of luggage. So that's the story of the trunk, a wardrobe trunk. And I like to tell children that it's very similar to the trunk which Professor Lupin had in Harry Potter. So that usually makes them very happy. There you go. That's a brief history of the West Bedroom and Mr. and Mrs. Kipling's bed with their initials on the canopy.